So for any of you who maybe came here seeing the thing about positive news for offenders and the rest of it, in case if any of you misunderstood maybe what was going on, I might be the speaker who'll help you this evening, because for anyone who wants a rosy future as an offender, I have a few tips for you. I would suggest to you, first of all, that you find an offence or offences that nobody knows about or that are rarely prosecuted. You mightn't know any, but I have quite a big bulk of legislation in one particular area where I know about 400 different offences, most of which have never been prosecuted. So that's the first thing you do. And then I think you try not to look obvious committing your crime. You know, you try to look like everybody else as you're going along. Well, this type of crime lends itself to that. And also because it's not prosecuted much, people often don't recognise it as quickly as they otherwise would. But even should someone report you to the police, say somebody you harmed through this crime, there's actually very little chance that you'll ever go to court. This is good news if you're embarking on a life of crime. And the reason that would be because the police and the prosecution services would need good experts in this area in order to thoroughly investigate the crime, and they don't have the resources, or they rarely have the resources. And finally, should you go to court, if you're one of the unlucky ones, if I get you totally wrong and you're like John was saying, one of the idiots, and you end up in court, you probably won't go to jail. So, for all of those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, can I commend to you white-collar crime? Because it really works. On the other hand, if you're here this evening because you couldn't find a place to stay, say for instance, you're at risk of being made homeless because you're going to be evicted, and you have no support systems of your own here because you come from a different part of the world. And say for the sake of argument, throw into that you have psychological issues that you know need help, but you're not going to be able to get the help because there's a long waiting list. Then I'm saying to you, I'm no comfort to you, because there's a real good chance if you end up being thrown out of your flat and ending up homeless on the streets, even if you've no interest in a life of crime, there's a good chance you'll end up in petty crime. Your petty crime is very visible and you're very vulnerable on the street. And you're likely to end up in a prison cell at some stage, having been tried by a court. And you'll get out because we all quote John Lonergan because he's so quotable and he's so right, to not enough supports, but if you're released early, you may have no money, nowhere to stay. You're back on the streets and getting ready to go back into jail for another time for more serious offences. Now, that last example is not to prove, because we don't need to prove what John Lonergan has proved again and again, that the bulk of the imprisoned offenders are from the most deprived parts of our society. It's actually to make a different point, a human rights point. And the point is about equality. What sort of a criminal justice system do we have if we have a situation where very serious white-collar crime can result in no sanction and in actual profit, and where simply not having the price of a roof over your head can end you in jail instead of in a house? That's not fair, right? It's not fair. It's not equal. And that lack of equality and that lack of fairness is a huge problem for us. It's a problem for us all as a society, because a democratic society is founded on the rule of law. And the rule of law simply means that everyone is bound by the same law. And they're not here. Isn't that right? So one of the ways of unlocking a more positive way forward for offenders must be about remembering that. Must be about all of us getting it into our hearts, our heads, and our speech that we want a more equal society, that we want a society founded on the rule of law, and that we want that in our democracy. So that's my first principle, which I think would bring about more balanced solutions for people and a better society. The second, and you're lucky there's only two, so I'm not going much further after this, but two has an A and a B in it, so I might still run out of time, but anyway. But my second point, actually, so I suppose that's aimed at everybody in society, particularly at the legal community, those implemented it. The next thing I think is just a challenge to all of us, and I don't think any of us, in truth, except maybe the guys behind me, do it very well. It's not because they're guys. Actually, some women do it very well as well, but they tend to be at the cutting edge of knowing what it is like to be an offender or to be in the situation of an offender in our society. And I think we don't do it well because we're so caught up in our own protection of ourselves. So I've taken over, as Darren was saying, in the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre recently, and a couple of things strike me. One is, who is the offender in a case of sexual assault? Well, it seems obvious until you actually look around you at all of these cases that come up and that you hear about, not in the courts, but in your normal lives, where in fact the victim of a sexual assault is very often the person who is asked to at least share the blame, if not carry the blame. So in some cases, we don't even know properly who our offenders are, which makes us a much more dangerous society than we need to be, and means that real offenders are left at large. But if you take it to the next bit, so that's sort of my current rant. I need to get that into everything I say. So breakfast, don't meet me for coffee at breakfast, I'll say it again. But the second thing is about how we try to protect ourselves as a society. And I think it's really important, if we want a more positive future for offenders, that we understand that keeping our own rights intact also means respecting the rights of others. Insofar as there was a recent rape case, a horrible one, where a man got a very severe sentence for raping his ex-girlfriend and her mother while he was on bail. The questions that came at me were, why was he on bail? And my response to them was then, as it is now, that the bail laws are very complex, and actually a lot of people don't get bail. But in any event, bail is a very, very important part of the right to be presumed innocent until you're found guilty. And the answer is not to take away those rights, but rather to ensure people are tried quickly, lots of other things. And this is, I suppose, another issue that's coming up now that troubles me in some ways, is that where people are convicted of heinous crimes and come back into society, what do we do with them? We are very anxious to protect our own society, of course we are, to protect ourselves, to protect the victims. But say, for instance, sex offenders who've served their sentence, they too have their human rights, which actually it is very hard to ensure that they are properly respected after they've served their sentence. So just in conclusion, I feel that when we are talking about positive futures for offenders, we have to, in some ways, identify that with equality before the law. Every single person, victim, offender, law implementer, lawmaker, we are all supposed to be equal before the law. I have no problem with a person who is about to become a government minister having access to the Attorney General when he wonders how he might obey the law. Good for him. It's great for him to have that level of advice available to him. I would like everybody else to have the kind of legal resources available to them in order to best work out what they need to do in order to get on with their lives and their careers. I would like everybody here to recognise that equality before the law is good for our society, is good for us, and will mean that we have a fairer system for offenders and a more positive outcome for them. Thank you.